Welcome everyone to this very special edition of World Series News. I didn't know what to call the show. Perhaps it's going to be that ET has phoned home, but realistically it's Brad Olsen, the author of the incredible Esoteric series, who's going to join me for this special edition as we talk about what I would call, and what has been termed just this week in the Hill, the biggest story of the century. There it is. UFOs are the story of the century. Wake up, America. This is published in the Hill on the 2nd of August by Rear Admiral Tim Galorday. It's an incredible, incredible headline. There it is, right up close in your face. And that's going to be the topic of today's show. And Brad Olsen, well, welcome back to talk to me. But this is the first time on my other channel, World Series News. And I am very, very grateful to have you here today. Welcome.
Hey, Jason Q. Always great to talk to you, and thanks for having me on the new channel.
Yeah, it's terrific. It's a big deal, and what a story, Brad, because it was probably your books that woke me up to a lot of the detail in what's going on. I remember purchasing both Future and Modern Esoteric together. And the first time that I opened up Future Esoteric and read through it, I shared a post on social media and I said that this was the book of the century. And congratulations on that, but also on the new book, Beyond Esoteric.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I appreciate those endorsements. And there they are on my bookshelf here in my new makeshift studio, my new ranch out in northwestern Nevada.
Coming to you wonderful. Live. Coming live, exactly as you said. Quite extraordinary. Can I ask you, when you put those books together, how much time does it actually take to start from idea to seeing it out there on the and printed?
Yeah, here they are. It's Modern Esoteric first in the series, Future. Each one of these took me 3 years, but these two I was writing concurrently. And even though they came out a year and a half apart, it was pretty much a 6-year process. As was the new one, Beyond Esoteric, is a 6-year process putting this together. And it's a labor of love. You know, I love doing what I'm doing, but it's all about the Great Awakening. It's all about the revolution as consciousness. And check this out, Jason. I just got some books from Bulgaria. Here's Modern Esoteric in the Bulgarian language. And they did a very faithful reproduction, but man, they made it thick, like the size of a dictionary. Modern Esoteric.
just incredible.
They kept all the graphics and did it up just right.
Amazing. Now, all of your books are all referenced and sourced, and realistically, if you spent 6 years on each book, Brad, that's the equivalent of a PhD.
Yeah, it was similar to a major research project, like a dissertation paper, but in the book form with references, as you said, and illustrations, captions, to really encapsulate all the subjects that have been withheld from humanity. And that's why I don't have to repeat myself, and I never do. And each book is well over 400 pages. So it's a compendium of all that has been withheld. And that's the nature of the word esoteric. It's just knowledge to a select few.
Yes.
But it's my belief, and I'm sure your belief, that that's not right. And we should have access to all this information, including the UFO stuff, which is the largest body of future esoteric takes on that question.
No, absolutely, because in all of this, what's going on here, the idea that we are moving spiritually into what people call the age of Aquarius. And years ago, I did some research on what that term actually meant. And the closest I got to it was they said that the age of Pisces in which we're leaving is the age of a hierarchy or a horizontal dissemination of information. And the age of Aquarius, it said, was characterized by a horizontal dissemination of information. In other words, transparency. There was no longer a hierarchy. And I feel, Brad, that this is where we are right now, that at the very end of the age of Pisces and this vertical integration of information, and now disinformation, censorship and all of that, that is the last bastion of a dying regime as we approach the age of Aquarius, and nothing can stop literally the information that's seeping out right now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's the Western model of these long-term cycles. The Mayans also had a long-term calendar. And in the far east of India, they have these long periods of time called the yugas. And in their cosmology as well, we're coming out of the Kali Yuga into a more enlightened age of humans on planet Earth. that we are in for great earth changes. And I don't think it's any coincidence that a lot of us are coming to realize that we're here to help as best we can in this great awakening, in this ascension process for the human race. It's a very rare occurrence when a formerly oppressed sentient race of people, such as humans on Earth, are finally waking up and getting rid of the yoke of this oppression that has held us down for so long, and understanding it and seeing through it. Because you really have to understand it on a personal level before you can even know it exists. And that's why they've been so good at concealing a lot of this information, is just to never give us any clues that they had this knowledge all along.
That's the most frightening thing, because the idea is, as we grew up and we used terms like the space age to describe the period, the so-called moon landing period, into what we then expected would be going further, and of course that stopped in the early 1970s, and it never happened. And as a kid growing up in the 70s, I remember space food sticks, and everything had an aluminium sort of a silvery look balloon, all the clothes that you wore and the things that you did, and this was the beginning of the space age that turned into computers and Commodore 64s, and that was the kind of era that it was. And we never got any further than that in the so-called retail space. But behind the scenes, we're now learning that this is a secret that's been kept for 75 years. And it was Dave Grush who the whistleblower testimony that he gave came out and confirmed all of this. Now, I wanted to play a couple of clips, and it might be a little bit fuzzy for you from where you are in Nevada, but let's have a go. And I just want to place one of them. This is to give most people a background, because we've heard this for many years, Brad, that the idea was that if you saw a UFO and you're a pilot, you didn't want to ever report it because you knew that you could probably lose your job. And this is a really easy way of censoring, and it's no different to what we've learned during the pandemic about what you can and can't say. But let's play this from Rep. Matt Gaetz at the congressional hearings, just a small snippet of what he was talking about in that big week of testimony.
Anger, I would say, I would feel that those pilots are still facing that difficulty in reporting this topic, and they don't have the tools to be able to mitigate this issue. It just goes to show how serious this is and why this is such an important issue for our pilots and for our nation.
It was stated explicitly to me by these test pilots that if you have a UAP experience, the best thing you can do for your career is forget it and not tell anyone. Because any type of reporting, either above the surface or below the surface, does have a perceived consequence to these people. And that is a culture we must change if we want to get to the truth.
Now, I don't know if you heard that, Brad, but Matt Gaetz talking about this culture of not saying anything. Now, that's the perfect censorship, isn't it? That's the government censoring what is allowed to come out. And that's why you have whistleblowers who say, enough of the censoring, we're going to get it out there. And this is Dave Grush, and many people around the world would be aware of probably the world's most famous whistleblower that's been in detention now for a long period of time, Australia's own Julian Assange. That's a separate issue, but it's the same idea that whistleblowers are there to tell the truth. And this story has been suppressed and mocked for so long that people just don't want to know about it. And even as we're slowly seeing a disclosure, a leaking of information, people are still quite numb and quite not necessarily knowing which way to go. So part of the purpose of us having a chat today is to try and determine if this is a real story, if it's a fake story, or if it is another manipulation, Brad.
It's a real story, and he's a real whistleblower. I was a speaker down at Contact in the Desert in early June, and there was a panel that was discussing backward engineered UFO technology. And the panel stopped to break the story that David Grush was given this early testimony, the first articles of him coming out. And they vetted him on the spot and said, this guy's the real deal. The question is, why is this all coming out now? Because there have been many whistleblowers before him, including Julian Assange, who have had really groundbreaking material to give to the human race. Just put it out there on the internet so anybody can access it. And that is what a whistleblower is meant to do. And we should praise them for it. They are the real freedom fighters. So, when the censorship and the oppression comes down as hard as it does, well, you're right over the target then. It was Voltaire, I believe, that says you'll know who rules over you because those are the people you cannot criticize.
That is exactly right. It is exactly right. And when you can't criticize a subject, or when that subject is automatically mocked, that is yet another way of having people censor themselves. That's the hardest part in all of this, Brad. And that's the thing. That's what I think what drove me to your books and to some of your colleagues, Michael Sala and Richard Dolan and even Stephen Greer. This sheer determination to walk away from other careers into this space. Richard was a historian. Michael was an Australian National University professor. Gave it up for this. That is a profound statement. And of course, Stephen Greer was an emergency doctor. I'm just going to put a picture up of the two of you at the recent awards ceremony that you're at. Have a look at this.
Oh, yeah.
There you are. Brad, I think you're the only person I know that could be taller than Stephen Greer.
Yeah, he's 6'3". I'm about 6'7". Yeah,
There
I'm
you
kind
go.
of the tallest guy in the. My conference nickname, I just got it from Johnny Enoch at the Conscious Life Expo. He called me Branunnaki. So, if you tease people, you have to be able to take it, tease yourself, I guess.
Oh, that's
But I do have
fantastic.
kind of all DNA that runs through my family, that's for sure.
Oh, brilliant! That is hilarious. But you received an award, as did Stephen Greer. But Stephen, he held a conference some years back, which was the Disclosure Project. So whilst we're looking at 3 whistleblowers today, he's interviewed many, many, many more, also from high credentialed careers.
Oh yeah, he's one of the leaders in the disclosure movement. He did his original panel on whistleblowers at the National Press Club, which was really groundbreaking at the time. It was incredible amount of information backed up with video, photographs, testimony, and other evidence. And he just did another one a couple months ago, also at the Press Club in Washington, D.C. And a colleague of mine who spent a year in Antarctica, Eric Hecker, gave testimony about an energy weapon they have down there that he saw shooting laser beams into the from where are you pointing? Straight up, exactly due south, which there's no civilization and very few satellites that ever cross the South Pole. Only the Black Knight satellite, which has been up. There we are at the award ceremony. He got Order of the Year award. I got a award for contributing a new series to Forbidden Knowledge TV called The Secrets of Antarctica, where I spent 26 days expedition going down there. And that's Stephen Greer's groundbreaking book on disclosure too, that came out concurrently with the very first disclosure event around the year 2000, 2001. It was right before 9/11. I remember that because this was the big talk of the community. And then of course they throw a false flag on us and the whole narrative changes and everybody seems to forget. But that's kind of how they trick us all the time and keep us off guard from what really matters.
Brad, I want to bring up a subject that I've been following and tracking and tracing in all of this. And would you believe I picked it up from the 4th Indiana Jones movie, and it was a character played by Cate Blanchett. She was playing a Nazi, and she made the term or reference to a hive mind. And I didn't think of it at the time, but it came back to me in a flash, possibly when I watched the film again with my kids. And it set something off. Now, the point is this. When we talk about the idea of a Zeta Reticuli, a grey alien, the ones that have been characterised in Close Encounters of the Third Kind and pretty much in all of pop culture, the one thing that comes up a lot is the idea of these biological entities, perhaps biological robots. They have a hive mind. They don't have free will. And just to park that there for a second, when we're watching world events at the moment, we have the West, which is looking towards a World Economic Forum-led United Nations / World Health Organization, one world government. And the only way they can achieve that is by censoring us into oblivion and all agreeing on the one narrative. And that, to me, represents hive-mindedness. Now, on the other side of it, there is the Chinese, Russia, Brazil, India, South Africa, creating the BRICS group of nations. And it's sort of headed up by the idea that they may create their own currency. But whilst China talks about the new era, Russia talks about the Greater Eurasian Partnership, but the BRICS group, the summit that starts this week in August, that's been going for some 20 years now, talks about entrance only based on your wanting to do so. There's no coercion, there's no force, but it's the idea that you're joining based on free will. And also they believe in a multipolar world as opposed to a unipolar world. So this characterizes the idea of what we call free will. So we now have free will on one side of the fence, not the Western American side, which is crazy because America is the land of the free, home of the brave. But America is being sucked into this drain pipe with the World Economic Forum and is going down this hive-minded pathway. Now, putting all that together, my sort of perspective on it all is that if there is this setup, as we're alluding to here, that the alien story, the UFO story is coming out now, it may well be that we are also going down a pathway of hive-mindedness, and it may well be these hive-minded ETs, aliens, technology that is somehow coercing perhaps the US government, the World Economic Forum players. The fact that John Kerry came out in the recent Davos this year and said that he talked about extraterrestrials, and Al Gore came out and said, if we don't do something about this, we will lose our right to self-government. Now, people took that as being a global government. I took it as being perhaps this is a real reference to there is a secret hidden hand or a hidden power over the top of the governments, over the top of the money people that is controlling us. And it's a hive-minded process. What are your thoughts? It's a huge topic, but where do we go from here?
Well, there you go. I think that's a great setup piece for people to understand. Here in Future Esoteric, I have the Santilli video, the orange ET, which, by the way, has never been disproved. So look at the size of the cranium on that guy. It's much like the cone heads that you find in South America. And in Beyond Esoteric, I have a whole chapter on the suppressed human origins. It's a huge story that we have not been given the knowledge of, but they're out there, these skulls, these elongated, they're human-like, but they're not human. So it does beg the question, Jason, who's really in control on planet Earth? These big brains who are using human cutouts like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, who I consider the colonels and the captains in this control false matrix, which is the prison planet of Earth. But we can invert that by kicking these guys out. But it's like the old Lao Tzu, that unless you know your enemy, there's no way you can possibly defeat him. And that's how, remember the saying, the greatest trick the devil ever played was to make the people believe he didn't exist.
And
these,
there you go.
Manipulators love to operate from the shadows, and we don't know who they are, but we know they own everything. Just look at BlackRock and Vanguard, and they own all the corporations that mean anything in the world.
But if you have those that are pushing, or you start to see this satanic agenda appear, these horrific things that people are doing to children, the Sound of Freedom movie highlighting just a small portion of what's going on there, you start to realize that atheism is in fact the gatekeeper of the satanic movement. Because if you can convince enough people that nothing exists, then that's the perfect cover story for this whole devil idea. And so God is the one that is suppressed in all of it. But if you can get to the conclusion that maybe people believe in Satanism, then by the same notion, therefore, you've got to believe that God has to be real. You can't have Satan and not have God.
Well, there you go. And isn't it interesting? They're all said to live in the bowels of the earth. So in the concluding chapter, the conclusion of Future Esoteric, I bring up all the similarities between the gray aliens, who are all test tube hatched. They're inner terrestrials. They are of this planet Earth just as we are, but they come from these underground bases and laboratories where they basically make these hybrids. And that's why they need the human DNA. That's what the whole abduction situation is all about, including the animal mutilations too, taking those white blood cells and other soft tissue body parts from the cattle. Did you know that in an extreme emergency, if you were going to die, if you didn't have it, you could substitute cow's blood with human's blood to keep somebody alive? It wouldn't be ideal. There would be some repercussions, some after effects, but you could stay alive that way. So we're actually very similar in our DNA makeup to a lot of the more intelligent mammals on this planet, as we all know, of course, chimpanzees and the ape family. But my point here is, if you just look at that evolutionary tree, okay, and a totem pole, we're not on top. There's a whole other level, even predatory species. That's another chapter in Future or in Beyond Esoteric, being aware of predatory species. Because some of them, like the Draco reptilians, well, they actually have a taste for humans. They like adolescents before they get too tainted with the toxins of the earth. So we're not on the top of the totem pole. There are others above us, but there are also benevolent ETs above us as well. And those, of course, are the ones we want to align with and are helping us from behind the scenes to help eradicate that which has been the devil in Satan in these underground bases, is all the names it ever was. But all the while, it was just these reptilians controlling Earth and using us as our own form of cattle to them. Right.
That
So
is,
the way
yeah.
we treat livestock is what they think of us.
Such an interesting point, because another one of these hidden stories, of course, and I just mentioned it before with Sound of Freedom and human trafficking, etc. Brad, in Australia just this week, we had a massive revelation that a childcare worker has been charged with more than 1,600 crimes against little girls in kindergarten, some 12 kindergartens over some 15 years. I'm going to put the headline up just for you now. It is an aside to what we're talking about here in this show, but it's not when you consider what Brad and I are talking about, how this all links together. Check out this headline. Calls for Australia to introduce the death penalty again for pedophiles after a Gold Coast child worker is accused of sexually abusing 91 children. Brad, this is an incredible story, but what it says is what you said about the Draco reptilians and using the adolescents before they are somewhat captured. Now, whilst we're not saying that childcare workers are aliens in real life, but what we're saying is that there is a story behind this story that somehow is acceptable. And where I'm going with this is that I interviewed our very own Senator Ralph Babette on my radio show yesterday, and he was talking about how he's not getting a whole lot of support within the corridors of power in the Australian Parliament, and he suggests therefore that perhaps this is what's going on behind the scenes. If you can't put the children front and centre as the number one priority, you've got a real problem, and that supports your argument that you just said there about these Draco, a reptilian that is actually using us like cattle. We are a second-class citizen to some other hidden power here on Earth.
And there you have the real controllers of this planet. And that's why we have to know who this species is, what their motives are, and to be able to combat them. That's why our government sold out to these malevolent ETs for the last century, really ever since the early years of the Nazis, when they were part of the Thule Society, and then they had adapted the women from the Vril Society, who after World War I, the Germans were the most technologically advanced civilization on Earth. So the benevolent Aldebaran started to give them basically blueprints of from free energy to 0 point to even constructing craft that worked. So once that was known, then it was absorbed into the early Third Reich. So we've been backward in engineering technology for a long time. And in America, I'm working on a book with Laura Eisenhower right now. I'm going to publish her first book, her first 3 books, but the first one's coming out this spring. And she has some massive revelations about her great-grandfather, Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Commander in World War II in the European theater, and then became our 34th president, very highly regarded, warning us about the military-industrial complex. But Laura's saying it got hijacked, and he inherited a bad deal from Truman, who basically surrendered to the Antarctica Nazis after that 1954 flyover. July 54, when there were all these UFOs buzzing the Capitol. It was one of the biggest news stories in history, and it should still be talked about, but it wasn't ETs. It was the Antarctica Nazis. And then Truman chickened out, and he gave them an unconditional surrender. We actually lost World War II. And this third Reich became the Fourth Reich. They're still up and going in South America and Antarctica.
Just on that, Brad, was this before or after Admiral Richard Byrd's trip to Antarctica when when these ships flew over the Congress House there?
That was afterwards. So that was the other battle post World War II. Remember, we all heard Victory in Europe Day. No, it wasn't. Actually, the next battle was another rout in favor of the fleeing Nazis. And this is according to a book called The Black Sun, describing the escape of the Nazis, and also Joseph Farrell's work on Nazi International. And they basically set up shop in these fascist countries of South America. When I was going over maps, Jason, on my way down to Antarctica, as you know, I was down there about 5 years ago, I'm finding there's these regions in Chile and Argentina and Brazil that are just these massive land holdings about the size of some of our small states here in America. And they're essentially micronations. And this is how the Nazis did it. And then they got fake passports through the Vatican on the rat lines to come over, sometimes with totally new names, identities, passports. I was reading in the Lonely Planet going through Bolivia that Klaus Barbie, the butcher of Leon, he lived out his natural life and he changed his name and he lived behind a lumber yard somewhere in Bolivia. So these guys got away with it. And they set up Nazi International, essentially the Fourth Reich, which while they've lost their military force, they did have very high-tech devices such as the Honeyboo craft and other technology that they got out of Germany before the war. The last battle was in the North Sea, and the U-boats, the Fuhrer convoy that was getting it all out of there, sunk a bunch of Allied ships. We never hear that in World War II history, nor do we hear about how Admiral Byrd got his ass handed to him in the Battle of High Jump. And that was the second battle of going after this Fourth Reich, and they couldn't get him out. So then that's why they buzzed the capital to force a surrender.
It's the incredible unwritten history, isn't it? And it shows you that somehow the US is subservient itself to another power. And it would be ironic, therefore, that World Economic Forum, headed by Klaus Schwab, and that accent, the perfect Bond villain, is the one that's dictating American policy. And also what's really interesting, of course, is that it was Trump who attended Davos and said, we're not playing this. And that's really when he got into their sights, because he stood up in front of them and said, no, we're not playing this game. And is it any wonder that he's facing somewhat, I can't even tell you how many charges, but 4 sets of criminal indictments, which I still believe that he's going to either get imprisoned and win from prison and somehow be pardoned, or they're just going to be wiped out in all of this. But it's very clear what's really going on here. The one thing I don't get is how humanity wants to just be in line with the power brand, and even if it is to their own peril, they'll happily take themselves out as long as they're right on the right side of the narrative. Brad, that is something that just beggars belief. I can't work that out.
Well, the old saying about Trump is every time you think they got him and he's down and out, he turns it around and right upon his oppressors. That's why he's never been fully impeached. They accused him of it, but it never went through. Nor has he been any indictment that sticks. He really is the Teflon Don. And I would be surprised if he just turned the tables on this one, because the good thing about this new indictment, that he is now allowed to call witness and testimony on the stolen election in 2020. They can subpoena. They have the power of subpoena to then put their case of a stolen election, and then the media has to cover it. This is their indictment, mind you. And this guy thinks he's going to put him away. I don't think so at all. I wouldn't be surprised if this was his name, Jack Smith, the prosecutor. He's down in Gitmo in 2 years when Trump wins. Every time they do something like this indictment, Jason, it only brings his numbers up. He's more popular now than he's ever been in the history of his career, because everybody knows they're all else sellouts. And I wouldn't say I'm exactly a Trump fan, but I will say that as long as the deep state and these globalists hate his guts, he must be doing something right. So I support him for that part of it.
Exactly right. And it's so interesting because many of us following, and if you're following any of the 17, the Q, whatever you want to call it, the movement, many people assumed that JFK Jr. was alive, that he'd somehow avoided the plane crash and was the mastermind behind it all. And in all of this now, his cousin, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., has emerged as a surprise Bernie Sanders type of candidate, but a Bernie 2.0, let's say, because he's exposing and red-pilling the Democrats that wouldn't be able to hear a word that Trump says. And I've wondered in all of this whether or not, because they're deliberately pretending that they're enemies, and they should be, because Kennedy was meant to be appointed to a vaccine body, and that was changed when Bill Gates got into Trump's ear way back in 2016, 2017. But again, the same thing happened, that Elon Musk and Trump also had a rift and fell apart. But then Musk went and bought Twitter and renamed it X, and has served the Trump agenda better than anyone else in all of this. So I wonder whether or not Kennedy will become Trump's Attorney General, which would be the first beautiful thing, because he would be the one person to declassify all the JFK files overnight, which would expose the CIA, and then he could get on the business with exposing the origins of the pandemic, and obviously the one-size-fits-all solution that didn't really suit anyone at all. And that would make him an even better Attorney General than his own father was back in the day. And that would then lead him to, if he wanted to, but he's already 69 years of age, and perhaps that would be enough for Robert F. Kennedy at that stage. But I'm looking at it and going, well, perhaps the people are saying maybe he'll be Trump's VP. I don't see that. But one thing I do see, that if Trump ends up in prison over these nonsense indictments, what if Robert F. Kennedy said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to switch sides to the Republican Party. I'm going to be the leader. I'm going to make Trump my running mate from prison. And let's see if we can get ourselves elected. And then he pardons him when he gets in. So there's all these crazy scenarios, but I love thinking about the possibility of what could happen in all of this.
Oh, it's the greatest drama playing out. It's wonderful to see it. And it's big stuff's coming this fall too. Mark my word, we're going to have our world rocked in many different ways. I mean, it already is now with all the UFO in the news and testimony in Congress. And again, I got to ask, why now? Because they've had 75 years to reveal this, and it's been a concerted lockdown of any kind of leaks or exposure of this magnitude.
Yes.
So I think we're being set up for predictive programmed to have it in our minds, get it into the population's minds a year or two ahead of time before Project Bluebeam, fake alien invasion. And I'm hearing this a lot in the whole UFO community, including with Dr. Greer, who I was talking to just Sunday night at this award ceremony in Miami. And he had a different name for it. I wish I would have written it down, but essentially it's Project Bluebeam. But the military's talking about it, and the military does have their own white hats that will try to foil it. And so what I think could happen is, if they do try to pull it off with holograms that shoot down the satellites that are beaming it, or the ground stations, and then it just glitches out and it just becomes a big joke. And then that would be the full downfall of this cabal. But they have, like an octopus, their antennas in everything. This is what makes them so dangerous and powerful. Plus, they control the printing presses and money. And when you have that, you got the world. So as we said in the setup, it kind of begs you to wonder who's really in control of planet Earth. And they're not these politicians that we see on TV. They're merely the puppets in controlled operations that serve this globalist agenda.
Now, Brad, in Beyond Esoteric, you draw a conclusion as to what the ultimate agenda is, and you attribute the quote to somebody else. And I'm just going to let you think about that for a moment, because I did, when we last spoke, there was a little paragraph and I snipped it and I put it on the screen. But I'm going to ask you to do that as I just set this up. And I want to talk about for a moment the 15-minute cities and the idea of bringing people in from the regional or rural areas into these so-called 15-minute cities. Because this is part of an agenda to rewild the population, and that would also support a depopulation agenda. But when you get to that quote, this is what your conclusion is to what the alien agenda really is. And before we get you to read that out, I want to relate that to the idea of, the question is, are the humans trying to outsmart the aliens, or have the aliens already cornered the human elites into playing out the agenda for them?
Yeah, great observation. What is the page number of that quote? I can read it out.
Well, you'll find that on page 199 of Beyond Esoteric, which reads, "The bottom line is that a very small secret ruling cabal of top policymakers are able to impose their agenda upon the Earth's masses, and this appears to be in line with an evil anti-human agenda, one of which some insiders have called an alien agenda to depopulate the Earth of humans, terraforming it using geoengineering technologies, and repopulate it with alien-human hybrids which will be mass-bred with a hive mind, always obedient to the Queen Bee, aka the new Caesar of the Ages, whom aliens are planning to install as their NWO leader as soon as they take over. And that quote goes to Leo Lion Zagami.
Right. But people aren't going to go along with it. And there's already pushback when they're trying to start to put up some of the early phases of the 15-minute city. And in the UK, they already have one in Oxford, England. They're putting in these new kind of cell phone tower type towers in New York City too. And I remember when I lived in San Francisco about 10 years ago, they were proposing making the whole downtown area, you have to pay to go in. And they wanted to restrict the traffic there. And that's what these 15-minute cities are. What that means is you'll be within 15 minutes of your proximity zone where you can go get what you need from the supermarket. There'll even be a park that you can go and play and do some sports, but you're really not allowed to go farther than 15 minutes away from your home. And if you do, we're going to have a central bank digital currency and we can deduct from it because you'll get fined if you do that. And ostensibly, they'll control everybody through this fake money system that they've been pushing on us since the 19th century and the Federal Reserve Act. I mean, this is what these bankers do, and they all happen to be this, I would even say, otherworldly types. Brian Forrester sent me a picture of this banker in the Basque region, and he had the elongated head. So they're still alive among us. They don't like to be seen, and when they're in the Vatican, that's why they wear the big fish hats to disguise themselves. Same with the pharaohs back in Egypt. So anytime you see someone wearing one of those funny big hats, kind of question maybe their cranium size is a little different than ours. And they're the real big brains that are calling the shots here. So yeah, now they want to box us all into cities. They even call it stack them and pack them. And then they're going to irradiate us with the 5G. So it's the perfect depopulation agenda, and get people off the land, get them so they're not self-sufficient, growing their own food, raising their own animals, and make them reliant on the system. Because when you're fully reliant on the system, well, that's when they got you. And they're going to start pushing the microchip under the hand thing again too. That'll be, your basic income. Yes. Do you want $2,000 a month? Well, we're going to need you to have this biochip under your hand. I can't tell you how many homeless people I think are just going to jump at that opportunity. But again, those biochips are programmable, and they can even emit small doses or deadly doses of poison. If they want to take you out, some of those chips have that delivery payload. So very, very dangerous.
Yeah. Now, in India, just a couple of weeks ago, there was the story of a trial of one of these basic income requirements. So some women in India were going to be paid a basic income, but they had to meet all these certain digital requirements, etc. Brad, you're not going to believe it, but do you know how much money they were being paid to participate in this project?
Well, in India, let's see, probably $20.
$3 a week.
$3 a week.
And people were complying. Yeah, and the scary part is just for how little will people comply with something. And it was the same thing. Take a vaccine, you go on a holiday, you go to the pub.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, incredible. And so they know that when they have this lowest common denominator, why would they give anything away when they don't have to do it? But it's just an absolute warning sign. We give you this, but you do that. That's a form of coercion, bribery, subservience, slavery, whatever you want to call it. But it's certainly not a level playing field in any of what we're seeing at the moment. Now, we've talked a lot about what may well be becoming and what's coming up and the reason why it's coming up now, Brad. But let's presume for a moment that we get past this and the human beings are able to outsmart the government. And the reason that we're going to be able to do that is that we've been mocked for 75 years. And Brad, you're one of many unbelievably accomplished researchers that have got incredible knowledge that most politicians that would be around you wouldn't have a clue about. So, in other words, if we move into a multi-intelligence world, it should be people such as yourself who would become the new leaders, or at least advisors to the leaders, because you know what's going on. What I'm looking for now is there a happy ending in any of this? Is there a non-hive-minded ET species, perhaps, that also respects free will, that may even look like humans from another part, from the research that you've done, that could allow us to move into what I call the age of Aquarius, or a 5D world, or something that prevails on top of this oppressive prison planet that we're currently on?
And this is what we call the timeline wars, because timeline one is exactly that. That is us shaking the yoke of oppression, bringing all these globalists to justice for all they've done, and moving on, but also declassifying and also utilizing all these incredible bits of technology that have been sequestered away, so we'd have free energy, no more polluting the planet. But just think about what we could do with desalination plants. The biggest obstacle right now is they use so much energy to convert salt water to fresh water. But if energy wasn't an issue, we could turn all the deserts on planet Earth back into gardens and really, change a lot of the environmental degradation, including bots that swim out in the ocean and clean up all the garbage gyres. And there are 8 now worldwide that are so huge, they're about the size of Texas, and it's just floating plastics and garbage. So we've polluted this planet horrifically, and technology could help us clean it up. But part of this depopulation agenda is to make us all sick. So there is no real motive to clean up the earth. Anything that's going to have us knock off sooner than we need to. And I have research in my book, Modern Esoteric, about living to 200. These bodies can go on and on and on for quite a ways if we can detox the poisons and eat healthy, non-tainted food, breathe free air, that clean air that's not being tainted with the chemtrails, and fresh water without fluoride and other additives. So this is all that they've put on us to keep us unhealthy and dumbed down, and that's got to end. And when it does, we're going to have much stronger, healthier, longer lives in these human bodies.
It's one thing I've said all along in this, is that I'm so disappointed, frustrated, but angered by the approach of the somehow establishment to think that their solution that they won't admit, that is obvious, to thin us out, to serve some agenda that they won't tell us who's giving them these answers. But in all of it, I want not only compensation, but I want a refund on at least the last 5 years that was stolen from me. And that means that I want to live in a world that I used to say we could live to 300, but there you have it. You've said that you can live to 200 if we change a few things. That's a really fascinating point. And I think that should give people a lot of encouragement and hope that this is how big we're thinking in all of this. We're not just thinking about the rules that they play. I just want to put up, this is something from my news show I did this morning. It's a quote from the New Zealand Defence Minister in relation to a new document that they've put out. But I just want to read the reason, just explains the point I'm getting to. And he says in this quote, "We take the world as it is, not how we would like it to be. It is essential to respond appropriately to the full range of national security threats, blah, blah, blah." It's the point that people take the world as it is. In other words, as they've been told that it is, because New Zealand, as part of the Five Eyes group, UK, USA, Australia, etc., Canada, they're all subservient to a surveillance system. So they're now inventing problems that don't exist. Another example, Brad, is AUKUS, Australia, UK and US getting together to build submarines. And this is under the guise of, to protect the Indo-Pacific region where Australia lies, we are going outside of the region to the United States and to the UK to side with them against the US's enemy, China, who happens to be Australia's biggest defence partner. Again, the world as it is, who we are subservient to here in Australia. It's just yet another layer in all of this. It makes no sense that we would pay $360 billion to build submarines for the US. We're paying that money, and we get $3 in return. And now we've become a missile manufacturer for the US government, or at least the military-industrial complex, and all of it. It's crazy how upside down this whole world is. It makes no sense. But here is the Defence Minister saying, we take the world as it is, not what we would like it to be. What we're saying, Brad, is we need to focus on what we would like it to be and work towards that, because everything else is being suppressed.
Yeah, and just keep in mind the Five Eyes, as you mentioned. What's the common denominator? We were all prisoners of Mother England at one time. So this is really the empire that is attempting to keep their world hegemony, and we should just accept it the way it is. Well, why? If it's a flawed system, humans are clever. We can change it. We don't have to go by a broken system. So no, military is never going to be the option. There needs to be some kind of world peace. And if you've heard of or researched the NESARA, GISARA is the global accounts, but national is in NESARA. It's gaining steam. It's gaining momentum. And now that the BRICS are forming, as you said at the top of the show, voluntarily to create a new economic trading bloc, it is kicking out the central bankers of the Western world. And the last countries that they fully control is Western Europe and the Five Eyes. And we're seeing that whole matrix starting to crumble now, as it should. It has to be burnt down and crumbled to the ground for us to start over with something based on a material asset, such as gold. Because when it's fiat, it's all fake, and somebody is controlling that and not having to back it up with anything. So that's totally wrong the way our current monetary systems are set up. And I think that's another esoteric subject. In the first section of Beyond Esoteric is all about neo-fascism and how they've hoodwinked us with this fiat currency system all around the world. The only countries that didn't go along with it, that didn't have a Rothschild bank, were the axis of evil: Iran, Syria, and let's see where the other ones: Cuba, North Korea. They did not have central banks. Well, now other countries are kicking them out, paying the debts like Russia did. You're out. We'll do it ourselves, and that's what has to happen. So it's only a matter of time, but they're going to go down kicking and screaming the whole way. And knowing their mentality, if they're going down, they want to take the whole world with them. So they're going to pull out some really dirty tricks in the coming weeks and months and years, as we see this very elaborate system of control that has really controlled the human race for centuries through these bloodline families, multi-generational, come crumbling down in one of the most spectacular implosions. And then we can move forward on timeline one, which is this golden age, which is a utopian bringing out technology to heal the planet, heal ourselves, and travel throughout the solar system and the galaxy in the Star Trek future that was actually humans 300 years from now. And that technology is already there. They already have our Star Trek future in underground hangars and controlled organizations, even right out in Australia in Pine Gap. They have quite a bit of technology that'll blow people away. So really, we have to move to the age of transparency, and in it, everything has to come out: the good, the bad, and the ugly. The human race has the right to know all of this stuff. And look, we're adults here, and we can handle it. And we've already heard the worst of it, what they're doing to children and adrenochrome and all the rest. And but again, maybe we're a food source to a predatory species that has existed above us. So it's a amazing time to be alive. A lot of people say, well, what can I do? I'm not even broke. All I do is read or hear your interviews or something. And I can't do anything. I can't be out there like you are. And I say, you don't have to. The only thing people have to do is just understand what's going on. When your consciousness changes and you see this hoodwinking of humanity for what it is, and that you won't go along with the old system, that's what we all have to do. The revolution is consciousness. It's just us waking up to this oppression that has controlled this planet for a long, long time. And then we change the prison planet into a prism planet. Beautiful. And this is the ascension to 5D, which the human race has the potential of doing in our lifetimes. So it's a very exciting time to be alive, to watch all this happen and play a part, even if just having skin in the game means you're just aware of what's going on.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it any better myself, Brad. That is an incredible way to sum that up, from a prison to a prism planet, and to expect it to happen in my lifetime or our lifetimes. That's exactly what I say to my kids. It's what I say to my friends. I say it often. Now, one of the things I wanted to quickly mention was that my idea of how we get to a NESARA/JASARA trigger is simple. And that is that we get down to the origins of the pandemic, of that virus that was supposedly leaked from a lab. It's now well accepted that it was manufactured. And if it was manufactured and leaked or let out deliberately, and therefore it was planned, then that implicates immediately the Wuhan lab. It implicates China or its deep state. It implicates the deep state of the United States. And at that point, the class action put upon by the human beings on this planet would trigger the greatest class action of all time, that could only result in a JASARA/NESARA, which in my eyes says you keep what you have now. All debts are eliminated. If you're a renter living in a rental property, you keep the property. The person who apparently owned it or whatever will be compensated in some way to the equity that they had, but then you start again from there. So everyone will inherit a property one way or another. That eliminates the debt. It eliminates the idea of commercial slavery at that point. And then when we get rid of all the poisonous people that have caused all these problems, that's when we can move into the truth, transparency, the age of Aquarius, and the prism planet that you're talking about, release the new technology, etc. So that's why I maintain, and people attack me for it and say I'm crazy, the origins of the virus is absolutely essential. And imagine the first man to go down in all that is the so-called god of doctors, Anthony Fauci, who deserves to never take another. Well, let's just go there. He's just the pinnacle of useless idiots in sense of that, what he's done to the human population. So it's amazing that we're seeing all of this at the same point, at the exact same time. Brad, we've talked for some time. We're almost at the hour. I just quickly wanted to play just from those clips from that Congress the other day. It's such a big deal, and it points to the fact of the power of the establishment in holding and suppressing this information. This is Congressman Burchett speaking to one of the whistleblowers. It blows my mind what he said, and it's also going to explain in the second half. The newsreader explains what a skiff is. Let's play it, and we'll come back.
Personally, have anyone been murdered that you would think, that you know of or have heard of, I guess?
I have to be careful asking that question. I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities.
Maybe in if we could get in a confidential area skiff, we could talk about that. But unfortunately, we were denied access to the skiff, and that's very unfortunate in this scenario.
You heard Representative Tim Burchett just reference a skiff. You're going to hear that word a lot tonight. It refers to a sensitive, compartmentalized information facility, essentially an ultra-secure room for government contractors and officials to review some of the nation's most sensitive and classified documents and information. This is all to protect our national security, which was also a top concern from this week's witnesses, especially when it comes to technology associated with UFOs.
It's amazing, isn't it, that you can have somebody in Congress talk about the possibility of someone being murdered for what they know within the government, Brad. And if that doesn't wake people up to realise that everything that we've talked about, or specifically yourself and others have talked about for most of our lifetimes now, you're never going to believe what's going on if that doesn't just get the hairs on the back of your neck to stand up.
Well, a lot of great men, including whistleblowers, have fought the good fight and paid the ultimate price. Everyone from William Cooper to Phil Schneider in America. Many others have had attempts on their lives, and other people have died in very, very mysterious fashions. Fast-moving cancer or the heart attack gun like Andrew Breitbart. It's a dangerous profession. Let's not kid around, but it's paying the ultimate sacrifice for serving the human race and putting this information out there. And so when you get to the point where you realize, I like the bumper sticker that says, we're not a human having a spiritual experience, we're spirits having the human experience. And when you just come to realize that these lives can be very fleeting, so you might as well make the very best of it and be the best person you can and not be afraid of death. There could be other worlds to be reborn on, or maybe you don't even have to come back as a being. I know I have a laundry list of things that I want to do when I leave this body. And if you know where you want to go and what you want to see, for example, underneath the Great Pyramids, go down and see what that Hall of Records is all about. You can do that. And you can even do that in your body when it's astral traveling or remote viewing. And these are superhuman abilities I describe in my esoteric books too, that we all have within us that are just lying dormant. They're latent abilities. All we got to do is, like a muscle, start working it out and it'll start to work again.
Yes, yeah, indeed. What a great subject. Now, there was a document that I found in the CIA reading room, and I went back a year or so later to fetch it for somebody else, and it had been removed, but I kept a hard copy of it. And it was a study done in 1983, and it was classified and released, I think, in 2003. And it was just about whether meditation was real, if the benefits can be documented. But what was really interesting in there was that it talked about two things. It said, one, we now know of other intelligence in the universe, and that mentioned remote viewing specifically. It's a Department of Army study. And it also said, we also now know that when you die, and I'm paraphrasing, you lose your body, but you keep your collective conscious or your memory as a whole, and you merge back with the infinite, but you keep what you already have. So in other words, you're an individual in the collective, and that confirms everything that you've just said, Brad.
And that's how we have these past life recalls. I've had mine when I've traveled around. The first was in Pompeii, Italy, the city destroyed by the volcano Vesuvius, I think the year 79 AD. I knew my way around. It still gives me goosebumps to think about it. I just published Michael Jaco's new book called Awakening of a Warrior, and it's 20 some chapters of all his past lives, which he has total recall memory on. And in the first couple chapters, he explains how other people can do it, and he's totally right. We have these memories of many, many lifetimes, and even moving up through the chain of being proto-humans, perhaps, and even animals. It was Dolores Cannon was saying that she believed that even all spirits start in the mineral world, then they move to the bacterial or microbial world. So all these forms of life, rocks to trees and plants to insects to lower animals, reptiles, amphibians, to mammals, then to humans. This is the trajectory we're all on. It's our own personal evolutionary trajectory. And we can go beyond even this human body form. But this human body form is pretty darn well suited to be able to use these superhuman abilities. And so what I mean by that, if you ever heard of the book Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, every chapter was on a yogi in India that had an ability to levitate, to use their mind to bend spoons like Uri Geller. It's very real. And he even proved to skeptics that these powers are within all of us. And so what I always say is, how come we didn't get a proper education in kindergarten? We're starting to learn about our chakras. And in first grade, we're taking our lessons using telepathy. And by the fifth grade, we're bending spoons and just like in the movie The Matrix, because we haven't been given the information we need. It's always been withheld. 90% plus of the most important information that has become available to some humans has been withheld from all the rest. And so that's what I endeavored to do in this esoteric series, and hopefully explaining this stuff on these interviews, which I think help people understand sometimes these complex problems. But we're just in an incredible age right now. I don't think it's any coincidence. We're all adults at this period of the Great Awakening and witnessing it and even playing a part just by having some skin in the game and being conscious in your life and what's going on around the world is helping. It really is.
Absolutely. Now, if you'd like to pick up a copy of Brad's book, I've just found on fishpond.com.au. This is an Australian website, Beyond Esoteric. That's the third in Brad's series. If you'd like to purchase that, you can see that there. Fishpond, of course, is just one place that you can purchase the book. Brad, where else can people buy it?
Well, I think Amazon.au would have it. Of course, they have it in their stores. It's very well distributed throughout the U.S. and Canada as well through Independent Publishers Group. Or people can go to my website, cccpublishing.com, with Michael Jaco's books, Leo Lyons-Zagami, soon to be Laura Eisenhower as a new author with us. and you can get copies here. But I'll just warn you though, anything outside the U.S., the postage rate has gone through the roof. It's twice or three times as much as the cost of the book. So it's probably best if you're in another country to try to get it in that country to cut down on that shipping cost.
Yeah, well said. But what a great book. And for those that have got Father's Day coming up here in Australia, the first Sunday in September, maybe that's a gift that you would like, or perhaps something for a Christmas gift or a birthday. Look, Brad, the three books, around 500 pages each. They are an encyclopedia of everything that you wish you knew but you didn't, and they're all in one place. Perfectly researched, and almost 20 years of book writing to put it all together. If it's 6 years per book or something like that, Brad, it's just an incredible library that everyone should have in their home, who realises that there's got to be more to their existence than what we're being told at the moment.
Well, thank you very much. It's a very nice endorsement. And my 11th book is going to be in the series as well, Esoteric Antarctica, which I've already started with the script that I wrote for the Forbidden Knowledge series called Secrets of Antarctica. I wrote the script for 8 episodes, and it was so good. I'm porting it over and making chapters out of each one, and that'll be my next book. And probably 2025. I still have that 3 or 4 year time frame, but all the while I'm working on other authors' books. So Michael Jaco's new book just came out. It's really great, This Awakening of a Warrior. If people are interested in their own past lives or having this kind of recall, great book, very well written. It takes you through historical events that we all heard of and learning in school, but from an eyewitness perspective. So, for example, the Battle of 300, remember the Spartans held off the Persians? He has full recall of being part of that. He was one of the 300 and how valiantly they fought. And that the Spartans training, their military training is so legendary. It is still taught in military colleges to this day, how they were so disciplined and so badass, and 300 men could defeat an army of 10,000. Well, read the book and see how they did it, or the movie 300 also explains it too, cornering them in a narrow gully where they had to fight hand to hand, one-on-one, and the Spartans were just piles of bodies. None of them could penetrate through.
Amazing. And continue to check out Brad's books, as he mentioned, CCC Publishing. Check it out. There's so much more there. It is mind-opening, and you are in total control of your own life. And all it is collective will to be able to say there's got to be something better than what's going on here. Brad Olsen, thank you for your time today. Greatly appreciated. Can't wait to catch up again in the near future, where we will review the events of what has happened and clarify if we were right or wrong, but push ahead with how it is that we escape the evil clutches of the World Economic Forum-led one world government that's determined to make less of us and more for them. Thanks everyone for watching this very special edition of World Series News.